I'm James Nadaski.
And I'm Tyler Farrell. We decided to do our presentation on the evolution of transportation. He had he did his project or research paper on the automotive industry, and then I did mine on like aircrafts and the aeronautical industry. So basically, whenever we found out that ours were very similar, we kind of just merged our topics together, and then this was the result of it. So I guess we're gonna go ahead and show you this fairly short video. Hopefully you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed making it.
I am James Nadaski.
And I'm Tyler Farrell.
And this is the history of transportation. The reason that I chose this topic is because I have a passion for mechanical things such as cars and planes, and I feel that the history of these mechanical things is extremely interesting and sometimes rather funny.
And I show interest in this topic because I'm interested in the evolution of technology to come into the future. Technology has evolved relatively fast throughout the decades and continues to baffle me with different ideas incorporated in its transportation system.
The history of transportation started a long time ago, but we want to get to the good, interesting part, and so we're starting in the 1860s with Carl Benz when he invented the combustion engine. The engine used gasoline and literal explosions to twist a shaft and transfer chemical energy into mechanical energy. This was done by squeezing then exploding the gas, causing there to be power. These bad boys were put into buggies and made horseless buggies, or cars for the less pretentious folk. They were also used by
the Wright brothers, the father of airplanes. This is their plane right above us, but also the last time you'll see this plane intact. Shortly after this photo, the plane will have crashed into millions of pieces. What you see here is essentially a flying toaster, but seriously, I'm still slightly confused how this plane even flew and took off. This thing was made of a piece of plywood and was powered by a water-cooled engine that produced an astonishing 12 horsepower. The tractor I mow grass with at home is pumping 10 more horsepower than that plane. This plane had a massive wingspan of 40 feet long. So basically, if you're thinking about it, this plane was the same size as a school bus. After this plane was developed, it sparked inventions of many different flying aircrafts that benefited the world, and in many aspects of transportation, one being as a weapon.
Now, the same time that the Wright brothers were doing their thing, the car was becoming a popular mode of transportation among the wealthy, and was starting to transfer down to the middle class. The reason for this was because of the creation of the middle class due to the industrialization of the late 1800s. This was only the beginning for consumer automobiles, but it wasn't really until the 1920s that the car became an icon. But before the 1920s, there was war.
During World War I, technology was an important factor for helping the Allied powers win with ideas like trench warfare and aerial warfare. The Fokker-Eindecker is not your typical form of air combat because of the way pilots fought in these aircrafts. It started with just reconnaissance, and then somebody finally thought it would be a good idea to fly around a plane and drop bombs on people. Now, the boys in the cockpit had to be really accurate. They didn't have targeting systems, just their wits and judgment. During this time, the pilot or co-pilot did not have a bomb chamber, so they would actually throw it out of the seat that they were piloting the plane in. Now that you think about it, around this time, they had very little instruments to fly this freaking plane. It was a relief that they managed to get these planes off the ground. Shortly after, they added machine guns to the nose of the plane and developed technology called a synchronization gear, which allowed that plane to shoot intermittently between the blades passing through the nose of the plane. This was what happens when that gear comes out of sync. Failure.
After the war, the wealth in America grew and everyone was buying cars, specifically the Ford Model T. However, there was an increase in competition for Ford with Daimler Chrysler and General Motors. These three later became the Big Three and would remain on top of the auto manufacturing for years.
20 years later, in World War II, stuff gets real. Planes become faster, larger, sleek in design, and definitely safer than its predecessors. Some of the iconic planes from World War II were the Spitfire, the B-17, which is also known as the Flying Fortress, and the P-51 Mustang. These planes are the backbone of what the Air Force was during this time. Powerful, strong, and fast. The planes now included a tachometer to let the pilot know how fast they were going, and an altimeter that told the plane's altitude. The plane now included a compass to help pilots head in the right direction when instead of reading those pesky maps, along with helmets that had oxygen pumping into the pilot so they weren't falling asleep at the wheel. These masks also included radios to talk to other pilots. Communication between these guys were important up in the air.
After World War II, the Big Three were still existing, and they would remain pretty powerful in America until the 1960s. From 1945 till the 1960s, the process for making the car was styled after the plane. This can be seen with cars such as the Chevrolet Corvette and the Ford Deluxe. Features such as fins were claimed to help cars be stabilized, which was true, but it was only really helpful at speeds higher than 60 to 70 miles per hour. Another safety feature of these cars was their weight. This was a safety feature by the logic of, if a heavy thing hits a light thing, heavy thing survives, light thing doesn't. While helpful while hitting trees or deers or other objects that get in your way, it doesn't fare well when hitting another object of the same weight or a person. Yeah, the lack of real safety features, plus America realizing that the USSR could topple them with a launch of Sputnik. This sort of failure in the American lifestyle led to Americans looking for less gaudy and expensive things. This counterculture movement started gaining speed at a really fast rate, and this goes for cars as well. An example of this is the company Volkswagen, which prospered off of the counterculture movement with two iconic cars, the Volkswagen Bug and Volkswagen Van. While the car was advancing, it was still slow to get across the country in just a car. To talk about fixing that issue, here's Tyler.
Remember that B-17 and that B-29 I told you about earlier? Well, guess who made them? Boeing. After being contracted to build military planes, they gained a lot of experience and funds to help build their company, or to actually help it take off. Anyway, the company became one of the biggest commercial airliners in the world. They built their brand on being the future and luxury of flying. So today's aircrafts are now fitted with jet engines rather than those old pinwheels on the wings of planes. These planes can pump about 1.25 tons of air per second. That's enough power to suck all the air out of America's largest football stadium in less than 1 minute. This is just one engine. There is 4 on some of our largest aircraft, like the Boeing 747. Speaking of the Boeing 747, this plane can hold 418 passengers and still have room for cargo. And if you thought this was crazy, this isn't even the biggest plane. The Airbus A380 can hold 544 people in this aircraft. And honestly, if all the seats were economy seating, which they're not, you would be able to hold 853 passengers in one aircraft. That's like more than a third of my high school.
While these planes were getting faster, the cars were getting slower. The reason for this is because of the environmental impacts that cars were having. I mean, just look at this picture of New York City. It's brown, and that's not a filter. It's brown. Laws were put in place for the design of cars that forced them to release less gases, mainly carbon dioxide. The Big Three did not really cope with this very well, and they were making very inefficient engines that cost more to operate. This didn't bother most Americans until the oil OPEC embargo that shortly followed these laws. People realized that American cars were too expensive. Volkswagens were for hippies, and they needed new car manufacturers to go to. Enter the Japanese with cars such as this 1970s Honda Civic. Japanese manufacturers had been making cars that were small and efficient, and the Americans needed something that was small and efficient. Thus, there was a massive increase in Asian automobiles such as Hondas, Toyotas, Nissans, and later Hyundais, Subarus, Mitsubishis, and Kias. In America, eventually became tired of the blandness that came from the Asian cars, and when the oil crisis ended in the late 70s, Americans needed to spend their extra money on nicer cars. This is where the luxury auto cars such as BMWs, Mercedes, Volvo, and Lexus. And these bad boys had all the features, such as this BMW N1, which had features such as half leather and half cloth seats, stereo, power windows, air conditioning, and non-adjustable seats. Or this 2020 Lexus LC500H that has a heads-up display, heated seats, 8-way adjustable seating, a color display, and a myriad of other useful features. And really the main difference between these two cars is just the technical innovation. However, the innovation is not really about the car, it's tech companies that sprung up in America in the 1980s. And there hasn't really been much change to cars recently. Well, there is one thing, and that is electricity. It started with a small startup company called Tesla, which is now one of the most well-known electric car manufacturers in the world. And there was also the help of hybrids with the Toyota Prius. After the success of these two cars, there have been a slow and steady improvement to emissions and speed in electric/hybrid cars, which has increased their popularity. But what is the future of cars? Right now, there are two paths that can be followed and are being pursued. The first is the path of electric cars, such as Teslas, Nissan Leafs, and what have you. And these are fairly popular. They're growing popular. They work well. Their only big con is that it takes 15 to 20 minutes to charge your car as opposed to the 5 minutes it takes at a pump. There is a slightly less popular and more sustainable option, which is hydrogen fuel cells. While these are even more sustainable than electric cars, there is one problem, and that is the fact that when you get in a crash with these, they have a tendency to explode. But what's the future for planes, Tyler?
Well, James, the future of airplanes is quite questionable. There are different ideas for fuel sources and for planes, but none have seemed to be an adequate alternative. One plane that comes to mind is the Solar Impulse. This aircraft was one of the very first solar aircrafts, and it's made a flight that was 24,854 miles long around the world. They flew from Japan to Hawaii and took them only a measly 505 days. While they did land at a few different spots, they only used one energy source, and that was the sun. Today, Boeing, along with many other commercial airliners, own the sky today, with there being as many as 44 million planes in the air daily.
And there are many as 1 billion cars in the world today. Transportation has grown great lengths within the last 100 years and will continue to change. But the question is, are you ready to take the ride?
Just fucking